Any guidelines on text messaging? People bringing phones that only support text messaging and they're not internet-enabled phones?
Well, that was one of the questions that I had when they, right when you started, when they described devices. Because I noticed they put cell phones in there, and a cell phone is what I have. So virtually it's useless. It has no internet connection. So other than text or voice, it's virtually useless. So I was wondering why that would be allowed. I guess you could text Cha-Cha and ask a question if you wanted to, but short of that, but then that would violate the policy because you would be on 3G or similar type network. You wouldn't be on your own network. So I don't really know why cell phone was included in the policy. I mean, my children have taken their cell phone, kept it in their backpack before for after school or something like that, but not out in the open. So as far as I can see on here, they're saying that you have to access relevant files. It's by video by permission of the teacher. The teacher can say shut it off, but I didn't see any specific language that said you can't communicate other than you can't be on a cell phone network. So I guess texting in texting sense would be out. One of the other things that I thought was going to have to be addressed was, and I'm surprised it wasn't in the policy, is that in the older grades, somebody was telling me just the other day, they were showing me their phone and saying, instead of buying the scientific calculator, he was a high school student, he said, look, I've got it right here. And I didn't have to spend $125 on the calculator. And I said, that's great, but you're not going to be able to use it on a test that would normally allow you to use a calculator because you have connectivity and, so there's going to be some of that kind of stuff I think that they're going to have to, and I think that as these devices merge, that's going to get more and more complicated. I mean, my last DVD player has Wi-Fi. I looked at my network and I'm noticing that I have a DVD player there that I didn't, had no idea. So I think, a calculator is going to be Wi-Fi pretty soon, or it's just. I think those are all things we're going to have to address.
What I wanted to do is, and we can use the people are here, and I think there's been a lot of things that have been generated in regards to questions. The legal side was one of the big ones that I wanted to look at, but actually Dave and the panel here brought up some really good stuff in regards to logging on. I'd like to have a roundtable discussion because I'd like to draft some suggestions that we can hand to the SAU and just say, you know what, we had a group of technologists came together and some parents and here's some suggestions, because I think a lot of it is not controversial in any way, but talks about, because one of the things that Dave, we've had discussions, and Dave had some really good insight in regards to the concept of the feeling that I got, and I think everyone else got, was that we're going to just unleash this and see how it goes and then create limitations. And the reality is maybe we should start talking about some limitations and a little bit more education for the kids and so forth, so we can get some clarity on how they're really going to operate this thing. So I'd like to just pull together and just maybe, we had a list, I think it's on my computer here, to start. Let's just go through a bullet list and let's draft some just some key things, suggestions for the SAU. Bill?
I was just curious, since I'm not really, all my youngest is in high school now, I was wondering how much latitude the teachers have about all this. Can they opt out of the program and say no devices today, or what kind of ground rules are there? I mean, is it voluntary for the teachers to participate?
Well, that question was asked repeatedly.
Oh.
The question was framed of actually by Mark. Well, first with the teachers is, when the school bell rings, what will happen? What will the classroom look like? And it wasn't answered. I mean, from the policy, we can see that the teacher can say shut it down.
Right.
The policy doesn't say that the teacher has to say start it up. So I don't know if, if a child comes in and just wants to open their device and start taking notes, or Obviously, recording video would need permission, but any other use of that device, according to the policy, they don't need permission to do that. So the teacher can shut it down. There has been no discussion about, specific classrooms opting out. There was also a question at the other forum about what if you want your child to opt out, but not only not bring a device, but not be put in a classroom where everybody else had devices and they feel left out. There was no plan for that. So at this point, there isn't any information that I know about, how to handle that. So I think we're kind of left. While I'm up here, I'll throw up my idea, which I have already proposed to the school board and to Matt Woodrow, is I'd like to see an online forum and a database. I think as these questions are asked online, they should be sifted through, and a question and answer, knowledge base should be set up, because just with the 1 week that they had that question thing up there was quite a few questions and answers, but at the end of the week they were erased. And that's just going to force everybody to ask independent questions or not even think of some things. Sometimes just reading through those FAQs, you just start to think of things that you wouldn't see. And I'd like to see some type of a forum where you can, as the measure of what's happening, parents can chime in and say, today my daughter had this experience with the device. And what should I do, or what should I think about that, or I don't know what. But I just have found it ironic with the 21st century technology and these forums and so forth being virtually free, that we're not taking advantage of that to educate people and to get their feedback as we go into this.
There was actually a comment in regards to that at the last meeting. I don't know, for those of you who were there, that was brought up about that. And they actually agreed to set up some sort of forum, and they actually asked for a volunteer, and I offered to help in any way that I could. Went up and spoke with them afterwards. I can't help but wonder if, because of all the controversy that resulted from the meeting and maybe discussion afterwards, that they decided that that might not be a good idea. But they did agree at the time that they would do some sort of forum for parents anyways.
I think the response by the parents showed that their rollout of this was just not enough. And even in this forum, I was talking with the superintendent and some of the other management, we'll call it. The emphasis on is we don't want to confuse the parents. My feeling is that we're all pretty darn educated and we can go and do investigative work. And the fact of the matter is one of the things that keeps being hit against me with this whole thing is my kids are digital native and we're digital immigrants. And my belief is that our kids are, we're digital adaptable and our kids are digital dependent. And I want to pull them back a little bit from the brink. But I think that we tend to be able to investigate and dig down to details like this, and the parents that we have in this community itself, there's a huge knowledge base on all this data, on this type of technology too. And I think it was just, the response was a little too high level, kind of the flowery aspect of it, and I think you're right. And maybe, I think parents tend to be a little bit aggressive when they're with their kids, because especially when I think the discussion that came out of that was that sounds more like an experiment. And when you start thinking about this, I think we only got one shot. So the question is, all of a sudden, if you upset the thing, not to gush over Dave here, but I've had these discussions with Dave, and he has a pretty darn good insightful comments about the concept of institutions. And that rang with me in the fact that the school's an institution, and it shouldn't be driven by fads. I did some research in regards to BYOD in the sense of the day that Palm Pilots came out, and the thought process back then in these articles that are 10 years old now said Palm Pilots are going to change the way we educate, and there was all these really glamorous articles about it. And one thing that really struck me funny about it was in one of these articles it said, the teacher said this was a great opportunity. We've seen great things happen in our class, but the reporter said in there, although there's not statistical evidence, there's only anecdotal evidence. The tendencies for this type of technology is that it comes and goes. But one thing when I've analyzed this whole BYOD program, there's one standard that keeps going from 20 years back till now and going forward, and that's the desktop computer. If you look at technology, all these fads come in and out. But the straight line is from a typewriter all the way down through is the laptop or a modified tablet or something of that nature. But the reality of it is desktop or laptops are tried and true technology, and all of these are just kind of hovering around it. So anyhow,
there's just two things that I wanted to mention. One of them was reading the forum after the other meeting. I wasn't at the meeting, but I watched the video. Very nice job. It seemed as though the pilot program was going to be a test to see if this was going to be implemented in the school. And going back to the policy, not the policy, but their executive report, that's not the case. The case is that the pilot program will conclude, and then the entire school, starting next school year, will move to this. That the pilot program is only going to be to adjust it. After I watched that video, and I would have to go back, but I thought it was said that, well, if this doesn't work out, we're going to pull the plug, or it's not going to go forward. But according to the report that's up online right now, it's going to go ahead next year, and that's what's going to happen. One of the other aspects that I wanted to kind of get into tonight, and that I think we should all think about, is the social aspect of this. Already our kids are delving down into their devices instead of talking to each other. Sometimes my daughters, I have to tell them to call somebody instead of text. I could see the child going into the lunchroom knowing nobody and immediately pulling that device out and acting like they are doing something so that they don't seem, isolated, instead of maybe, creating a relationship with somebody new, or, making a new friend, or having a social interaction. And I think that the school, we really rely on that so much for social interaction for our kids. They are in some programs after, but it's really the school where they get the mix of people. And I just have to wonder if we are just further putting these devices in their hands all the way through school. Is it more isolation? And are we really doing a disservice versus, the way that we're doing it now? I've always been a big supporter of the computer lab. You go to the lab, you sit down, it's the same operating system, it's the same computers. You can instruct, they can work on their own. It's that time ends, and you leave. And that, I think, is still the model that I like. It has been said here that those are on their way out, that this is the new way. And I also think that lets go of typing skills, because if we don't go to a desktop or a laptop, you're not going to have kids with typing skills. We were developing typing schools at Underhill in 2nd grade, and that will diminish, and we will end up, kind of moving away from that. So those are some of my concerns as we just kind of move into, this kind of this open thing and see what happens. The other point that I've heard brought up before is what, it's called the arms race. Is are we going to have kids coming and wanting devices like other kids have, and is it going to be somebody going to get the answer faster because they have a better device? I think these are all issues that we have to kind of think about. I'd really rather have my kids go to school and interact with the teacher and other kids than to look things up on the internet. I just don't see that value, as the superintendent described, a teacher talking and a kid whipping out a device and finding out an answer. Frankly, that's not appealing to me. I would rather have them sit there and think.